Podnutz Pro, episode number 23. This is the show where we take you from home computer repair and we introduce you to small business. Everything from servers to routers to switches, all the stuff that you see and hear about and you wish, what does that stuff really do? So let's introduce Mr. Matt. Matt, how are you doing today, sir?
Good, Lalo. Hello, everybody.
And of course, I am Lalo from BetterPCTech.com, and I appreciate you guys and girls coming and watching the show. So, how was your week, Matt?
Oh, it's been going fantastic. How about you?
Oh, I'm busy, insane, tired. There's not enough coffee or Red Bull in the world to keep up the amount of energy I must have. You know.
You should switch to Mountain Dew.
You know.
Or Diet Mountain Dew.
Diet. Okay, I'm about to say
healthier.
Diet Mountain Dew. I had two friends within the past 4 years that drank Mountain Dew all day, and they had heart attacks. They had an artery bust. So ever since then, I stay away from Mountain Dew. But
well, okay.
I throw caution to the wind. But what is your topic today, sir?
Well, before we get to the topic, which is going to be remote access,
Okay.
I want to talk about an email that we got. I'm not going to read the whole email. I'm just going to cover the gist of the email. Because we did say, if you have suggestions, recommendations, to feel free to email us. And we want that.
Right.
So we got an email from Billy. And I'm not going to read the whole email, but the gist is episodes of the more technical nature rather than the user support issues and the customer service. So he was suggesting getting back to technical topics. So I emailed back with Billy and let him know we're going to cover a broad range of topics.
Okay.
But I do want to get back to more technical shows. But I wanted to cover the user experiences and customer service early because you can't underestimate the users that you have to deal with. Mm-hmm. Office politics and that kind of stuff. It's a big role of what you do when you're supporting businesses. But with that said, we are going to get back to more technical shows because that's a recommendation. So if you have any recommendations, feel free to email us.
Sure.
Matt at podnutz.com, Lalo at podnutz.com, and let us hear your recommendations or your thoughts.
Exactly, and I couldn't agree with you more. When you deal with small business, the support or medium or enterprise, the clientele is quite different. With the home user compared to the guy who works in the office, it's two entirely different attitudes. And like Matt said, it's definitely a different world. So, and the goal of this podcast is to cover those technical podcasts, which, trust me, we have plenty of shows in the future, Matt, of all type of fun stuff, right?
Yeah, and we're still a young show. What is this?
23, my friend.
23. Great. So it's still a young show. We're still trying to get our rhythm. So there's going to be growing pains. Can't please everybody, but we're going to try with a broad range of topics. So on to the topic for tonight.
Yes, sir.
Which is remote access for users. Every business that I support, users want to have remote access to their data, their email, their systems, what have you. They want remote access. So there's a few ways that we set up remote access. I know people talk about log me in free, and I think I've made my thoughts clear about that. I don't care for that for end users trying to access their business computers. So there's a few things that we set up for every company that is going to help facilitate remote access when they're ready for it. One, I've said before, a static IP address. You have a business, you're going to have a business internet connection. They are going to supply you at least one public static IP address, and you only need one. Some companies will try and sell them 5 or 10 in a special package, but you don't need it. You just need to tell your customer, call and get one. That's all you need for most companies. Of course, there are instances where you need more than one, but most small businesses are only going to need the one.
Right, and like you stated, some businesses do need more than one public IP address for several reasons. If you have multiple servers or boxes or appliances that hit the web. But like you said, or did you say a large number of companies just need just one, or small businesses?
Right. And another thing that we need, and I like to have on every, and this is again mostly for small business servers, but for any business who has a server that's going to be doing remote access, I like to get an SSL certificate installed on that server. Now we're going to cover SSL certificates in detail, I think not the next show, but the next, how to install it, where to get them, that kind of thing. But you need to have an SSL certificate on your server. And the reason for this is I'm sure people have gone to websites, or maybe you haven't if you're not doing business support, where you get that nag screen. You go to an HTTPS site, and you get the screen that says this site is not safe or something like that. Click here to continue, not recommended.
Right, and then especially with IE, I think version 7 or 8, there's this big fat warning now. Do you trust this site? And blah, blah, blah. And that's all it caused because of that SSL invalid certificate.
Exactly, and it confuses the users because they're getting a message from their computer that it's recommended to close the browser.
Right.
So we like to get the SSL certificate on the server. It bypasses that screen, and in some instances, you need the certificate for things to work. And the third is DNS, but you have to have DNS. If you have a mail server on your network, you're going to have DNS records set up anyway. Let's say for mail.podnutz.com. If that points to your Exchange server, you can use that one for what we'll talk about in a few minutes.
Okay.
So the first type of remote access is basic. It's just running Outlook. You have a user with a notebook. He's got Outlook installed on it, but he's not in the office. He's a salesperson that's in another state. And all he needs is to be able to have access to his company email. For these users, I like to set up Outlook over HTTP, or HTTPS actually. Because some salespeople might have a program that only works with a local mail client.
Okay.
So some of them can't use web-based email because in their client, it needs to see a local MAPI client, basically. So it's the same thing as an Exchange client. When you're in the office, you're connected to the Exchange server over your local network. When you're out of the office, there are settings you can do for Outlook basically over the internet, port 443 HTTPS. And there's a few settings under its Outlook Anywhere settings. And for this to work, one of the things you have to have is an SSL certificate on your server. If you've got the default self-signed certificate, it's not going to work. It'll just keep prompting you for a login. So you're going to have a SSL cert for those people. Now, if they don't have Outlook, or if they don't need a local MAPI client, you can use Outlook Web Access. And this is just a link that you go to based on your company name, either remote.podnutz.com/exchange or /OWA, depending on your version of the server, and you can log in and you have Outlook that's a web version of Outlook.
Right, and this version is very nice because it doesn't offer the full features of Outlook, the client you have on your desktop, but it definitely allows your users to access mail. I always tell folks it gives you the most necessary features for you to check your mail. What's nice, and you can check it from any browser. It doesn't matter where you are, at a hotel room, halfway around the world, and you can definitely check your email.
Right, and the latest version for Small Business Server, I haven't seen the latest, but Small Business Server 08 has most features.
Oh, really? Okay.
Oh, yeah, it's much improved over SBS 03, much improved.
Okay.
Now, one thing this does work from almost any browser because it does not need an ActiveX control. It works from my Mac. It can work from Firefox. You don't need the ActiveX control. for Outlook web access. You do need it for something else, which we'll cover, but you don't need it for Outlook web access. And that's typically whatever your DNS is pointing to /exchange. That takes you right to your Outlook web client. Now, if you go to your DNS name /remote, you can log in through any browser. And what you do is you've got a few options depending on if it's Small Business Server 03 or 08. But you can have the option to check your mail, which just brings you back to the mail client. And you've got the option to connect to your computer at work. Is the two main things that you have in there. Now, when you click on Connect to my computer at work, it is going to want to install an ActiveX control. So for this part, you need Internet Explorer. I've seen that's an issue. And I've seen a lot of issues where clients calling saying they can't connect. And the issue is they're not installing the ActiveX control by clicking the yellow bar, or top or bottom, depending on your version of IE, or the ActiveX control got disabled somehow. And I haven't pinned down why that gets disabled a lot. Okay. But I see a lot of users, if you go into the ActiveX controls, it's actually disabled. So you re-enable it and it connects, no problem. But this is convenient for users who have a computer at the office to connect to. So let's just say he is a salesperson, maybe he's based in the office, so he has a notebook. His only computer is a notebook. He works in the office sometimes, or anybody, salesman, manager, and he wants to take his notebook and he wants to leave the office once in a while and use it from the road. In this instance, he has nothing to connect back to because he's taking his computer with him.
Right.
So in this kind of person, more than likely, if he needs access to files, like his My Documents, that kind of thing, you can do the offline files. It's going to sync to his notebook. When he takes it away, he can still have access to his files. And I'm going to set up his Outlook. Even though it's in the office, you can put these settings in so when he takes it out of the office, it detects that it's on the internet. He opens up Outlook, he gets a login prompt, he logs in, and it connects over the internet for Outlook. Same exact Outlook as when he's in the office. Now, one thing you have to be careful about when you're setting up Outlook over HTTP is there's a couple of options in the setup for this. And if you're not sure what settings to pick, it can be a little tricky. And the settings I'm talking about, when you're going in these settings, there's an option to always prompt for password on a high-speed connection or low-speed connection. I'm pulling it up right now, mine.
Okay.
And it's called the Exchange Proxy settings. So it says on fast networks, connect using HTTP first, then connect using TCP/IP. And it's got an option below it, on slow networks, connect using HTTP first, then connect using TCP/IP. When they say fast or slow networks, they're meaning basically 100 megabit connection, local area connection. So you leave it checked for on slow networks, but if you leave that checked for on fast networks, even when they're in the office, even though they logged into their computer and authenticated to the domain controller, if you leave that checked for on fast networks, it's going to open Outlook and you get to a login screen.
So it will, I'm sorry, Matt, so it will authenticate the user once again, even though they're already part of the domain and already logged in.
Right, because you're telling it to connect using HTTP first.
Gotcha.
So you can log in and it'll work fine, but it's annoying for the customer to log in again. So make sure you don't check on fast network. I see that checked a lot of times when I get called of why is Outlook always prompting me for a login, and either it's set to work offline or this on fast networks is checked. So in the checklist, if you went into your Exchange account properties, there's a connection tab, and depending on your version of Outlook, it's going to say something like Outlook Anywhere and there's a checkbox saying connect to Exchange using HTTP. And there's a button that says Exchange proxy settings. And here is where you're going to make these settings. So it's got, real quick, there's only a few options. It says to enter your URL to connect to your proxy server for Exchange. This is going to be normally mail.whatever.com in here. The next setting is about the SSL certificate. Only connect to proxy servers that have this principal name in their certificate. And I don't know why you put this, but you have to put MSSTD : and I'm sure it stands for something. I haven't looked it up. But MSSTD : and then your SSL certificate name, which is probably going to be the same, mail.whatever.com. You uncheck on fast networks, connect using HTTP first, leave on slow networks checked, and for authentication, you're going to set it to basic authentication. And that's the only settings you really need to worry about. That's the only settings there are, actually.
Yep.
Now, I like to set this up. Of course, you can't test it unless you're out of the office. So I'd rather I set it up, I tell the client, when you're out of the office, test it. If it doesn't work, call me when you're out of the office. I'll connect to you, and we can check the settings.
And I just want to let you know, Matt, Google that tells me that MSSTD stands for Principal Name in Microsoft Standard Form. Now tell me,
fantastic.
Tell me that your life just got better by knowing that.
No. Well, now I know why I put MSSTD : on there. Thank you.
You're quite welcome.
That makes it all better.
And let me ask you a quick question for the folks at home. How long did you have to set this up time and time again, and before it kind of stuck to you? Because I can see this being a long process for for just like the average Joe that just has not done it before.
You know what, Lalo? Can you repeat that?
Sure, it's not a problem. No, and I was asking. You and I both know when setting up an exchange bots, there are certain things that should be done and not be done, or certain options that should be checked. And how long before it took you to kind of have a good feel of how to let's set up these clients, such with these settings?
Well, I'm going to tell you, Small Business Server makes it really easy. 03 was very easy. With Exchange 2000, it wasn't easy at all.
Okay.
In SBS 03 and SBS 08, if you follow the wizards and let the wizards do their job, and you set up DNS correctly, meaning the name points to the right IP, it's very easy. It's almost set up for you without doing anything else.
Great.
So it's very easy to set up.
Yeah, and because I know for a lot of folks that not that fear, but just not being familiar with some of these screens and and some of the verbiage of these options, and you read it and you go, well, what does that mean? And
right.
So,
and it's easier to see it a lot of times, which would make for a good video, which might be coming in the future. But yeah, right. Okay. So we'll say about that for now. Now, there's also one issue that I see a lot when I'm showing a user how to connect to Remote Web Workplace. And they want to test it from their computer in the office. And I've told them, you go to https://mail.podnutz.com/remote. So they type that into their browser at their computer in the office, and it doesn't work. And they say, well, it's not working. It's not going to work inside. It's remote access. It's not local access.
Right.
Now, the problem is for me, most times, I've got a WatchGuard router in place. So when I'm trying to access a public resource like mail.podnutz.com, that resolves to a public IP address. So when I type that into a browser internally, the WatchGuard can see basically it's routing traffic out to the internet and then back in. but it sees the request as coming from local, so it just blocks it. And normally, at least for us, we don't host websites internally. We have websites hosted by web servers off-site. So their DNS is pointed off-site, and the only thing pointing back to local is the mail record. I know this might get kind of confusing. I'm going to try and keep it simpler. So I type in mail, https mail.podnutz.com/remote. It doesn't come up. Inside the office, you just need to put https:// whatever the server name. Let's say the server is server. It's https:// server/remote.
And
you're gonna get a certificate error, but you can access it that way to show them how it's going to work.
I gotcha. And for those that are joining us, and you're talking about the remote web workplace, is that correct, sir?
Right. And you can do let's say server/exchange to show them the interface. Now, if you wanted to, and we do this sometimes, you can create, and this is a little more technical than I put in the notes, but your DNS on your server, the only zone it's going to be looking for is your local domain. Remember, we had the forwarders set up to where anything you request, the server sends it out through a forwarder to your ISP's DNS records.
Right.
And sends it back. So you don't have any domain records set up. So let's say I wanted somebody to be able to type in mail.podnutz.com/remote inside and have it work. You can create a new DNS zone on your server, which I won't tell you how to do right now because it'll take too long. You can create a new zone for podnutz.com and make an A record called mail. Now when you ping mail.podnutz.com from internally, you'll get the internal server's IP address. So let's just say it's normally a 98 something number, which is a public IP for mail. When you ping mail, you'll get the internal 192.168. Whatever address.
Mm-hmm.
So just if you want users to be able to do that inside.
Now, what would be easier in my book, it just put like a shortcut in anybody's favorite via a group policy with their internal address, and problem solved.
Right. Well, and sometimes users for phones, I see issues where their server for an exchange client is set up to mail.podnutz.com, but when they're in the office connected wirelessly, they can't find the server.
Very true. Oh, no, that's a good point. That's a good point.
So with this DNS entry, instead of trying to go out on the internet and come back in, which the router is typically going to block, it just goes to the local IP of the server.
Gotcha.
So sometimes it's useful to create those zones. So that's remote web workplace. Now, when the user connects, so let's look at a separate user. We talked about the one user who took his notebook out. He's going to do Outlook over HTTP or Outlook web access and offline files, which I don't like offline files, but sometimes you have to set it up. So let's say another user, he does have a computer to connect to. He's at his house. He leaves his desktop or on at his office, and he wants to connect there. There's a few things he can do. He can go to the same link. Let's just say mail.podnutz.com/remote. He gets the login screen. He logs in. One of the options he can pick is connect to my computer at work. Now, in O3 small business server, this can get confusing for the user because in this list, when he clicks on connect to my computer at work, he's going to see a list of every computer in the office. This could be 50 computers. He's got to know what his computer name is.
Okay.
Now, this is just training, and hopefully they remember. Not every computer is named for the user. Some businesses have, or they try, to say that they have the service tag. That's the computer name. Or they have some naming convention that makes sense to them that they want to use. So you have to let the user know this is your computer name. You're going to click on this computer to click on it to connect. Now the problem with that is when they do the computer merry-go-round and Mary gets a new computer and Mary gives her computer to somebody else and it goes around and around, it's not the same computer name anymore. So, for a user who's been connecting to one specific computer name for 2 years, she needs to remember to connect to the new computer name instead of the old one, because a lot of times the computer is not renamed when it's moved to a new user. Now, it is good housekeeping to rename the computers to try and keep up with your naming convention if your computer name is based on something about the user, their phone extension, their office number, whatever. But that doesn't happen a lot. So you just got to beware to have the user know what their computer name is that they're going to connect to.
And then you are correct, and some of the naming conventions that some people pick are, like Matt said, if for a user to look at it, it looks really confusing. But like to you, being the IT manager, it makes sense. So I keep that in mind, because some of these names I've seen are like 20 characters long. Floor, building, room, and then the service tag of the PC. So
right, and that's going to be for larger businesses. You're not going to have remote web workplace. That's a function of small business server exclusively.
Sure.
So at the most, they're going to have even 70, 75 is still too much for a lot of people to scroll through. And it's also in this list is going to be possibly non-existent computers. Because if you don't keep your directory clean, if you've removed the computer from the network, it doesn't mean the computer's gone from Active Directory. So if you don't keep your Active Directory clean and up to date, you might have 50 computers in the list, but 10 real computers. So keep that in mind. Now, with Small Business Server 2008, it's a little bit nicer for remote web workplace. Once you click on the computer once, you can say always connect back to this computer.
Okay.
So when they have a big button that says connect to my computer, they got it selected once. The next time they click on the button, and it connects to their default computer, which is nice.
Okay.
So that makes it a little bit easier. Now the list, I've had some users. I'm sorry, not users. I had a few companies that only a handful of people used remote web workplace. And they had maybe 40 or 50 computers. And they didn't want to scroll through the whole list to find their computer. This was server 03, small business server. So you had to pick it each time. You couldn't set a default. They didn't like scrolling through the list. There is a way, and I don't recommend anyone doing this, but sometimes you have to do what the customer wants. There is a way to hide all of those other computers, but it's manual. There's a registry key that you can go into, and did I send that to you, Leva? That registry key?
Let me see.
Am I gonna have? I'll have to find it. I think I can find it. I got it.
Okay.
Okay. Now this is a manual key. It would work better if it was saying show only these computers. But if you have 50 computers and the boss or your customer says, I only have 5 people using this, I only want their 5 computers showing up, you've got to remove 45 computers. And you have to do this from the registry of the small business server. You go to HKey local machine, software, Microsoft, small business server, remote user portal. From there, you're going to add a new string value called exclude list. Of course, there's no spaces in there. Exclude list. And when you modify this key, you've got to type in the name of the computer. All of them. So computer name, comma, computer name, comma, computer name, comma. And I had to do this for this particular company. I had to hide 45 computers.
Jeez.
because he only wanted those 5 to show up. Now, I had an option for him to just use straight RDP for those 5 users, but he didn't want to do that. He wanted to use Remote Web Workplace exclusively. So the problem with this method was you have to remember that this is done. So if one of those 5 gets a new computer, you've got to remember to take out that computer name, because that computer may go to someone else. You got to hide it and then type in the new computer name. So that's kind of annoying, but after I did this for this one customer, I had a new customer call me, and they were wanting to know why some of their computers were not showing up in Remote Web Workplace. And of course, I thought, I wonder if they were hidden. I had never seen that before. In fact, I had to do some research on how to do this. I looked at the register key. All their computer names were typed in there. Quick fix. He wanted them all to show up. Deleted the value, actually, the whole registry key, and they all showed up. It was very strange. So let's say if they change companies, not that it's your concern if somebody changes companies for computer support, but
Right.
it's there, and it's something you may need to check if they're not showing up, or if you want to hide them, that's how you can do it.
Let me ask you this: when you in small business environment, when you add a user account, do they automatically have rights to access the remote web workplace, or this is some rights that you add after the fact?
If you've left the defaults created by the wizard, they're going to have access. They're going to be in that group by default.
Gotcha.
So you can get a feel for your customers. If you want them, they'll know. Of course, maybe they won't know. I've told them before, yes, everybody can log in remotely, and when they hear that, they don't like it. So I guess it's hard to explain every possible scenario to a company.
Sure.
But if it comes up, they may want you to change it. So that's for people who have computers. Well, there's also, like I said, remote desktop connection. So RDP directly. All this stuff is browser-based, remote web workplace. But let's say they have a Mac computer or some other computer that doesn't run ActiveX, and they want to connect to their computer, you can always use remote desktop protocol. This works on the Mac, other clients. Now this can get kind of tricky if you're having 10 people that need direct remote desktop access and they want to bypass RWW. I don't like doing it, but if we need to, I create a reservation for each one of those 10 computers. Yeah, yes, by default, RDP works on port 3389. After the reservation is made, let's say I got a reservation for 20.200.
Okay.
I might have the next person say, look, you're going to connect an RDP to mail.podnutz.com:3390. I'm going to leave the listening port on the target computer. I'm going to leave that 3389. I don't want to change that. In the router, I'm going to say anything coming in externally on 3390, redirect internally to 3389. So I see a lot of listening ports changed when they don't need to be. Now, if you don't have a router that can do that, if you've got a cheap Linksys router,
right, then at that
or
point,
some kind of cheap off-the-shelf router, you may have to change the listening port because they may not be able to do that. Now, if you do change a listening port, remember, if you have the Windows firewall is on, which it should be on, even though you have remote desktop connection checked to allow, if you change the listening port to 3390, you've got to add 3390 in that firewall, in the local firewall.
that's a good point, because that I used to change the listening port, a long time ago and before. And that was one of the major issues that people would forget, is that you would not allow that rule in the Windows the firewall going back to SP Service Pack 2, and then at that point you'd be like, why is it not working? So that's a good point.
Yeah, then once you change and reboot, then you can't connect, and you have to go to the computer and change it.
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I changed that. I add that port, say 3390, and then I change the listening port, then I reboot, and then it connects. Now, if you're on a 08 domain, you've also got the domain firewall policy that you've got to contend with, not just the local firewall policy. So in '08 server, not only do you have to set it locally, you've got to edit the domain firewall policy for that computer to allow that port also. So when you change the internal listening port, you've got to do more work to get it to work. It's just much easier to leave it and use your router for that function.
Right, and then especially when you have to make a change, it's just one rule in a firewall or in a router, and then you're good to go.
That's right. Now, of course, when you set up all this stuff, remote web workplace, remote desktop, check all the power settings. You don't, turn off hibernation, turn off sleep mode, tell your network card to not allow Windows to put it to sleep, all that kind of stuff. Because if they leave at 5 and they try and connect at 9 p.m., it may be hibernation, sleep, whatever. They're not going to be able to connect. So just all those power settings.
Yes.
So it's going to go on sleep on you.
Because that will bite you. I mean, that every place that I've been at, people can't get to their boxes and then come to find out because the PC went to sleep or there's something funky with the NIC card or power management. I mean, it's very frustrating to find out. In fact, the other day, one of my boxes that I built, I tried to connect to it remotely at night and I couldn't. Why? Because I forgot to change the power management for it not to go to sleep. So.
Right, and of course you're testing it during the day and it works fine.
Exactly. It's awesome.
It's that when the user goes home on the weekend or night that they can't connect. So just remember the power settings.
Yes.
And yeah, it's
good tip.
It works fine for me. That's what you get.
Yeah, and then when for a quick little workaround for those who are kind of intrigued, if you just do a local awake on LAN packet, as long as you know the IP address and the MAC address, and you can wake it back up. But that's provided if you have awake a NIC card. Why can't I think of the name? If your PC can support awake on LAN, but again, that's more work than you really want to go to at 10:30 at night.
Yeah, you didn't want to get that call.
Yeah.
Now, so this is all about individual connections. One user wants to connect to this computer. One user wants to check email. If you start getting to a lot of users needing to connect in, it's nice to have a terminal server. Now what this is, if you're not familiar, it's a dedicated server that can host multiple connections. So if you've got people, even a separate office or remote salespeople, whatever, you want to run programs, Mass90, JobBoss, Peachtree, some kind of program that you need to run on your network. Like Mass90, you can't have a computer running at home with I guess you could, with a Mass90 client and try and run a VPN client. Yes, technically you are connected to the network and you will have access to the Mass90 database or the JobBoss database, Peachtree database, whatever, but it's not going to run good over that VPN connection. In this case, you want a terminal server. You install the software on the terminal server once, provided you have right licensing. And 5, 10, 15, 20, however many users your terminal server can support, they can all connect to run that software. So terminal server is great for remote users who don't have a computer to connect to, a second office where they don't want to necessarily run if they've got a bad connection, or even you got a second office that's 100 miles away and you want them to run your Mass90 software. Like we said, the bandwidth is not going to be there for them to run that remotely.
Right.
But even if it was, if you want to update the program, do you really want to go over there to update every single desktop?
Oh, I agree.
And you can just update the server once.
Mm-hmm.
So it's good for administration, it's good for users to connect to. There's some setup you got to do and some licensing concerns.
Yes, especially licensing. But for the folks that heard a terminal, the server, and we're like, what is that? Just think of it as you're able to remote desktop into a box multiple times. 10, 20 people can be on there at the same time. And what Matt's saying, if you have this terminal server run the application, then it's centralized instead of having 20 people trying to run it. So,
Yep. Now, some tips when you're installing this. It changed with Windows Server 2008. Even something as simple as Office. And really, I'm glad they changed it because I don't like. Well, that's another story. I like things to be licensed. I see a lot of. I go behind techs, other companies. They've got a Windows Server 2003 running terminal services. They bought one license of Office and they have 50 people using it. I mean, that's not. It's not licensed for 50 users.
exactly.
I don't like telling them this is not licensed correctly. You need to buy it. Well, it works fine. I understand it works fine, but it's not licensed. So.
Oh no, and I agree. And when you first hit a terminal server box, when you get to a new job or a new gig, and you go, "There's every application underneath the sun here." Wow.
Right, because they think they can run it once, load it once, and it's good for everybody, but it's not. So, and it's not necessarily a cheaper way to connect, because if you're going to have a server supporting 20 users, it's first you need the Windows client access licenses just for the Windows.
Mm-hmm.
Then you need terminal server client access licenses. This if they're going to run Office. You need to really, if you have 20 users on there, you've got to buy 20 Office licenses. You can't just buy one. And with Server 08, if you try and install a version of Office that is not meant for terminal services, you're going to get an error message and it won't install. It'll tell you have to have the right type of license.
And for those of you that have ever messed with licensing, I rather bash my head up against the wall. There's per user, per device, and it's like a mathematical equation. Insane.
Yeah, and the key is they're just like regular users. If they're on your network, they need a Windows CAL. If they're connecting through terminal services, they need a terminal server CAL. If they're using Office, you need an Office license. So that's really what you have to remember. Now, so installing terminal services, it's a separate server. We're not going to go into the hardware specs. Just get the biggest server you can afford, RAM, all that stuff.
Get the biggest server you can afford.
We're not going to talk about server design for terminal services right now, but you're more than likely going to have a small business server or a server and a terminal server. Now, you want to avoid using the small business server as a terminal server. Even if the user says, well, we only have one guy who needs to connect, the small business server will support 2 remote connections, but those are meant for administrators to connect.
Exactly. And then
not for users.
And correct me if I'm wrong, once that third person tries to log in, it goes, sorry, there's 2 people logged in, you can't log in here.
Right, and not only that, it's a big security risk to have any user running anything on your computer, on your server. And you don't want to install all this software that they want to use on the domain controller. So it's just mainly a security risk. If they only have 1 or 2 users that want to do this and they don't have a computer to connect to, buy them a computer. Just put it in a server closet, buy them a computer, name it Bob Remote, whatever, and tell them, look, you can use Remote Web Workplace or RDP, and you can access this as your own personal computer. It's here at work, and it's just used for you.
You know, and it's funny that you bring that up. One of my past gigs, it was they did AutoCAD, and they had these 5 users that worked throughout the whole country, but they didn't have, their PCs weren't powerful enough to run AutoCAD, so let's set up 5 boxes, like you stated, all in a room behind a locked door, and I just gave them through RDP. I said, here are the names of the PCs. It was cheaper to go that route than ship these people, new PCs and versions of AutoCAD and all that good stuff.
Yeah, so sometimes it's cheaper if it's a couple. Now, if they're getting the 5 or 6, I don't recommend it. But if it's 1 or 2, I tell them, look, if he worked in the office, you would supply him a computer. So he's working remotely all day long. Let's just get him a computer. We'll put it here. He can connect to it. But the terminal server itself, here's one thing I see wrong a lot, and I may have mentioned it. You don't want to install this. When you install a terminal server, you can install it in two methods: per user, per device. You want to use per user, always per user. And the reason is, it's not that you're trying to get around licensing, but when you connect and it's in per user mode, it doesn't decrement the count. So let's say you're in per device mode. If you connect using your home computer, it can say, oh, there's one license. I gave it to this computer name. Now I've got 4 left. You connect from your office to do administration. It says, oh, there's one license. He has that. When you connect as per user, the license count doesn't decrement. It stays at 5. You will always have 5.
Oh, okay.
It doesn't matter if 50 people connect. You're not going to be denied because of licensing. Now, you still need to have licensing. I'm not saying install 5 and use 30, but you won't get that call saying, I can't connect, and you realize all the licenses are given out. So per user is what you want to use. Now, it is very possible, if you're in per device mode, to go over your licenses accidentally. You say, I might connect to do remote administration. Somebody might connect once and not ever connect again for months, but his license, I think, lasts either 90 or 120 days.
Right.
So that can take up a lot of licenses. And you can't clear those. Once it has the license, it's got the license until it expires. Well, we're going to get to that. So when I see a server that's in per device mode, I recommend to them, we need to change this into per user mode. And it's fairly easy, providing that you have the terminal server license key codes. If they don't have that, they're really kind of out of luck, but they should. So if they have them, it's very easy. On your, I say it's easy. I realize it's not easy for some people who've never done it.
Yeah,
it's just
and I'm gonna say you.
I'm used to talking to my techs. I tell my tech, it's easy, just do this, and they're techs, so they get it. So I'm
Gotcha.
I don't want to say it's easy and then mislead people. So it may not be easy. It's a few steps individually that are hard, but I know it can be nervous. Now let's go back to the instance of we had an existing SBS 03 server, and we added a terminal server maybe last year. That terminal server is newer than the small business server. It's running server 08. Now, when you're doing terminal services, you have a service called Terminal Services Licensing, and that needs to be installed on what they call the top level server. It's a service that dishes out your terminal server licenses to the people requesting them. So if you have the example of a small business server 03 and a server 08 used as a terminal server, well, your top level is the newest server, 08. So you'd install a terminal server licensing service on the 08 server, not the domain controller. If you have both of them as server 08, say a small business server 08 and a server 08 for your terminal server, you're going to use a domain controller. So you want it on the newest operating system. And if they're both the same operating system, you want it on your domain controller. This is a licensing server. So to do this, if you want to change from per device to per user, on the licensing server, there's going to be a service, and it's called, I think, Terminal Server Licensing Service. If you don't see that service on your server, you're on the wrong server. So go to the other server and look for it. If it's there, you want to stop it. Of course, have everybody out of terminal services at this time. You're going to stop that service. Then you're going to go into the system root, system 32. In there is a folder called L server. I believe it's called L server, license server. rename it L server old, whatever. Create a new folder called L server. Then you're going to go back in, restart the terminal service licensing server. Now it starts and there's no licenses because basically you wiped it out by renaming that folder. Because your licenses were in that database in that folder. Add licenses, you have your key codes with you, you can type those in, but this time when it asks you per user or per device, you're going to select, of course, per user. Now at this point, once the licenses are back in, you might think, great, everybody can get back in. You tell
Yay.
users you can connect. It's working now. It's all in per user. Now you might not notice if you didn't look, but you're going to get a call in 30 days or 31 days or whatever it is saying we can't connect. I'm getting a message that my temporary license has expired. And you're going to think, well, that's strange. Why are you getting temporary licenses? Now, the server gives out temporary licenses when it has no licenses to give out. Now, we just reinstalled it, so it should have per user licenses. What normally happens at this point is there's also a place on the terminal server, and this may or may not be your licensing server. This is actually on the terminal server in the control panel, administrative tools, terminal services configuration. In here, there's a setting that says what type of licensing are you using, per device or per user. If you didn't change that, it's still on per device. You just click on it, change it to per user, now it'll give out per user licenses. So what it was doing before was it's saying, okay, I'm giving out per device licenses, but I don't have any per device licenses. I've got per user licenses, but I'm not supposed to give those out because I'm set to per device.
Gotcha.
It's not smart enough to change that by itself.
And you said that this was in the behavior in 03 and 08, or?
I believe it is in 08, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, they're separate. It's because you might have multiple terminal servers in different modes. So each terminal server can have its own mode of which licenses it gives out. You may have 2 servers with per device, 1 server on per user, and your terminal server license server might have 10 per users and 20 per device. So they can be separate. So 1 server may be set for per device, 1 per user. So that's a per terminal server configuration.
Now, in the chat room, they had mentioned as such items like how do you configure the printing during RDP, which is a topic that's pretty in depth, but just can you give us a quick overview?
Well, basically, you have to have the same driver on the remote and local computer, the same print driver.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, not all printers work with terminal services and remote desktop, especially cheap printers. Cheap printers have cheap drivers. Laser jets. You don't want to install those drivers that are 300 megabytes. You want to have the ones that are they're like 15 megs, a normal size driver. Not this HP driver that takes 45 minutes to install.
Right.
You don't want that.
And then a lot of times you can extract the MSI where if you go digging enough, you can find the driver that you need, not the bloatware. So
yeah. So what you do is you install the driver. If you have a printer on your local computer, you connect to the terminal server, and you want to print in your terminal server session. So it tries to map your local your local printer to a terminal server session. So you've got to install that driver on the terminal server or on your desktop computer at the office if you're connecting to that. Same exact driver. It's got to match exactly. Now, sometimes if I'm doing a site-to-site, say I've got an office with 10 people. They all connect to my terminal server. I'm more than likely going to have a IP printers over there at the other office. What I normally do in that case is I install on the terminal server, I install those printers in that office as an IP printer on the terminal server. So when they
Gotcha.
connect, the printer's there.
And for everyone, everybody gets them, regardless
And
of
for
who logs
everyone.
in.
Yeah. And in that case, I disable the printer mapping when they connect. Otherwise, you're going to see the same printer a few
You're
times. You're going to
right.
see it mapped from theirs, and they're going to see it from the local. So I disable printer mapping in that instance.
Gotcha. And
So
what Matt is describing there for TCP/IP printing, if you add a new printer, of course, like the default is USB or proto port, you can actually create a port, 192.168.10.100, wherever your printer scheme is, and you can install a printer on that port. So anyone on the network can just print that printer.
right, and that printer just goes to the VPN. Because if I have a remote site, I'm going to have a VPN set up.
Right.
Those users will connect across the VPN or point-to-point tunnel. And the printers are actually a good way to see the VPN tunnel is up in that case. They say it's down. Well, I know what IP I gave the printer. I can just try and ping that IP.
Right.
If it pings the IP, I know the tunnel's up. It's some other problem.
Good tip.
So, and the ports that you open for all these things, there's not that many ports to open. Remote web workplace, of course, you're going to need port 443. And that's open for Outlook over HTTPS. You need it for remote web workplace. You're also going to need, if you're using RDP, port 3389 or whichever other port you're going to use. If you're going to redirect a port, open that. And I believe you're going to use, well, we didn't talk about it, but there's SharePoint services you can use too. And we didn't talk about that, but 443, I'm sorry, there's another one. Remote Web Workplace for Windows Server SBS 03 is going to use port 4125. So if you're using RWW on Small Business Server 03, it's 443 and 4125 both. For 08 Small Business Server, you just need 443. You don't need 4125.
And like we've said on past shows, it's very important to know your ports, because it helps in the troubleshooting when you're looking at logs at the firewall. You know what ports are allowed and what's not allowed. And Matt just spewed up there a couple of ports that are critical for the operation to make this a successful terminal server environment.
Yeah, because if you don't open the port, you're not going to get very far.
No, it's true. It's very true.
Um, and there was something else. I'm trying to find it.
For the notes, let me see.
Was that it? So normally what we're going to do is we use all of these for different things, and it all depends on what the user wants to do. Sometimes it's easier for them to use RWW. Sometimes they use RDP. I like the terminal server for more than a few users, definitely. And now if we have a terminal server, that is what I leave default port 3389.
Okay.
Because I can tell the user just connect to, and I may even make a new DNS entry for it. I may name it ts.podnutz.com. So when they open the RDB client, instead of typing in their public IP, which they're not going to remember because it's not easy to remember, I can tell them type in ts.podnutz.com
Okay.
for the target computer. And if I have a DNS entry for that, it'll connect right away. And that's easier if they change ISPs, they get a new public IP, I can just change the DNS, and I don't get calls from however many users are connecting with the IP address.
Right.
I do the same thing actually for VPN connections. Because in the VPN software, you can usually put a host name instead of an IP address.
Okay.
I might create vpn.podnutz.com. So in the VPN client, this is like a mobile user VPN client, not a site-to-site.
Right. Right.
But that way, when the user tries to connect and you've changed IPs, you don't have to call that user. You just change the DNS for vpn.podnutz.com back to the new IP address, and they're good to go.
That's pretty smart. I can't tell you the amount of years I have emailed users. We've changed ISPs. Here's a new IP address that you need to change to.
Right.
And
So if you, yeah, that's annoying.
yeah, yeah,
Sure.
yeah. And they go,
So
what VPN client? Oh, just call me, please.
the thing you click on every day to connect. Yeah. So, right. So I don't like, if a user has to have an IP address, I'd rather map something to DNS.
No, I mean that's very smart. I mean it's simple, but it's smart.
Yeah. That's what DNS is for, so you don't have to remember the number.
Yeah.
So when you can, you don't always control DNS, but if you can, make an entry for that.
Good tip, man.
So we got some emails to
Yeah,
read?
man. I got a 3. Again, if you want to send us an email that you want to run the show or want answered, you can send it to either Lalo at podnutz.com or Matt at podnutz.com. I just jacked up the whole domain name. Sorry. One email is from Eric. He goes, I would like to get your suggestion of firewalls. What about the built-in firewall? I assume he means on the server. For someone watching their penny, is it good enough? Is the $300 firewall appliance really necessary? I think Sonic has one. And what are your thoughts on that, my friend?
The built-in firewall in Windows is good for the desktop only, inside your network. You definitely need a good router. Your first security breach, infection, whatever, is going to cost more than $300 to clean up.
Yes, and I'll add to what Matt's saying here real quick before it leaves my head. But you want your first layer of protection to be a external device, because once built-in firewalls within the operating system, even though they have their purpose, but I don't want it to hit my NIC card first. I want it to hit something outside of my box before it even gets there.
Yeah, that's like they're knocking on your door already.
Exactly.
If they're hitting your neck, you get perimeter security, an appliance that handles that. I don't even like mail hitting the small business server first. I send that through a mail filter off-site before it even hits the mail server.
Okay.
So a good firewall is a definite need. Now, I'm not sure. I did see some $300 ones. Now, I'm not sure how. I haven't looked at those. They're better than the off-the-shelf $40 routers, I'm sure.
Sure.
But I'm not sure their capabilities. I know WatchGuards are pretty powerful devices. So it's probably a step above those $300 ones. But between a off-the-shelf router, Windows firewall, $300 router, WatchGuard. I'm going to pick WatchGuard first, $300 router second, and that's really the only two choices. So
No, and I agree. And what Matt's saying is very key. If you ever been in an environment where you got hit with some type of malware or infection, the long nights trying to clean up that mess, you really wish that you would have persuaded them to buy a $3,000-$4,000 appliance. So
yeah, it depends on the size of the company. I mean,
Very true.
a WatchGuard for a small company may be $1,000. You make it by around $850, $900, up to $1,000 for a smaller business. I put in one. The one I put in, the company had 70 users at each location. We put, I think it was the $1,700 per location.
okay.
So they're a little more expensive, but for the traffic that you're getting, because when you put these routers in, they do so much stuff. It's just like a computer. You can't expect a Pentium 2 to run AutoCAD 2011 and
Right.
all your accounting software. These WatchGuards are so powerful. They have things they have to do, and it takes computing power. So the more connections going through it, the more computing power it needs, more processing power. It's going to cost more.
And is WatchGuard the firewall that you recommend through the years that you've been doing this?
Yes, that's what we use. Yep.
Okay. All right, then cool. Got an email from Marcus, and it says, "Hey Steve, love your work, Steve. Great show, especially Podnutz Pro." See, Steve is still alive. That's somewhere. The best tech podcast on the net, hands down. Lalo, keep Keep up the scripting up a storm. Matt, I want to be Matt Rainey when I grow up. Look, that's another person that wants to be Matt Rainey. Awesome.
Funny.
Here's my question. We've heard Matt talk about blocking port 25 outbound except on the mail server. What about the other ports? What are the best practices? What is the best practice for a small business? I'm interested in finding the right balance between security and usability. If I lock my customers down too much, they'll be called in all the time because they can't connect to iTunes Store or something similar. Thanks, Marcus in Australia.
Yeah, outbound security. The only thing we block is outbound mail normally, because you will get those calls constantly. Port 25 normally is what we're going to block. Outbound all but from the mail server. Now there's also port 587, which sends mail to, but you don't see that too much. But nothing should be sending out port 587 anyway.
Right.
So you could block port 25 and port 5. You could block port 25 out from everybody but the mail server, and block port 587 from everybody, because nobody should be sending on that anyway. But yeah, other than that, we don't block anything out.
Yeah, and you're right, especially from a security standpoint. What's the one phrase that they always say? With security comes inconvenience, because security is not fun, and when you lock down a network or a machine, I mean, that's what happens. So
yeah, the only reason I'm blocking out port 25 is I don't want, if they get infected with some SMTP engine, they're going to get blacklisted. Right. So that's why we're blocking that. And it's going to bog down the network, even if you're not concerned about a blacklist. Something sending out tons of spam is really going to kill your bandwidth. So if it hits the route, if it hits the watch guard and it's just blocked, it's not gonna hit your bandwidth. So,
all right,
and it's easy to see in the logs. If you suspect something happened, you block port 25. You got a rule for, and you can normally filter by rules, and you can see port 25 blocked is getting these detections or blocks from this IP address. It's easy to find your infection for a rogue SMTP engine.
Awesome. And got one more for you. This is from Louis DP. He goes, "Hi, this is Louis again. I am wondering if it's possible that you can talk in Podnutz Pro all about network and how to set it up from the ground up and doing all the configuration. Videos would be the best. And thank you again. Now, when I see this, the question, I kind of go,
Yeah.
And why is that, Matt?"
Why? I don't know why that is, Lalo.
To build a network from the ground up, like the challenges are some of the following. I'm pretty sure Matt will add a lot more. It's each environment is a little bit different. You have to survey the environment and see what they need, and then at that point, you can configure the server in so many different ways. And there's a foundation of best practices that you should be able to follow. But again, it's just a lot of work. And our goal of this podcast is to cover those subjects in increments and try to give you a good foundation so you can go ahead and pursue the supporting small businesses. But I mean, it's a tall order. I mean, that's why you don't see a lot of people do it or try to attempt to do a show like this, because these topics can string out to so many other subtopics. So yeah, from the ground up, and that's the suggestion of videos is a good suggestion, because that's more the kind of thing where you really have to see it to really understand it. And I know books can sometimes be, I don't want to say hard, it's just, it seems to me sometimes the people who write these books, they don't understand the real world, maybe. Because there's some things I've read in books where I'm like, no, that's not right. If you do that, you're gonna have this problem. No, and I totally agree. And when I was in college, the instructor would go over, for example, setting up a exchange bots or server, and then he said, okay, that's the Microsoft way. Now let me show you how you would do it in the real world. And it's you know, like at first, and you go, why would you teach this other way? But then once you go to the field, and then you go, oh, now it makes sense. So,
Yeah. So something might be coming down the road for that, and we'll of course cover some topics on future episodes for that too. One thing I want to do is exchange set up on a new server. You know, there's so many things to talk about for exchange. We have to start with the basics, mainly out of the box, how it's configured and what you need to do. But
right.
yeah, we'll keep that in mind for future topics.
All right, then, cool, man. I think we're closing the books on show number 23, man.
Cool. So as I'm going to try and do every week, I might tell you what the next show's topic is going to be.
Yes, in fact, the funny story that Matt has sent me about 3 or 4 emails, and me and my lack of caffeine prepared for the show for a totally different topic. So that's why I didn't have all the appropriate screenshots and everything that I needed. But again, if you have any questions, any suggestions, any ideas, you can email me at lalo@podnutz.com. You can reach Matt at podnutz.com. I don't know about you, Matt, but it's very gratifying to answer these questions and kind of put everything in perspective. The show that was on before us, which is Podnutz Daily, Steve was talking to someone who gave us some kudos for helping him out because he set up his first small business server, and he said that he listened to episode number 13, and he used the words, it kind of walked him through it. So
cool. It's awesome.
Good job. So
I heard Dora's got a project going too, so we'll see how his project works out.
oh, I am waiting for it. Dora, I am waiting for it.
Is he he's not in the chat. Okay.
I think he is. I definitely think he is. But anything else? Any closing comments, sir?
I didn't say what the topic was.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Is that a cliff? Is that we can leave a cliffhanger? No, I'll tell. Setting up wireless in business.
Okay.
Is what we're going to talk about. Wireless connections for businesses.
Yes, and that was the show that I prepared for tonight until Matt said, no, that's next week, buddy. Oh, sorry. So, thank you for joining us, and meet with us again next week where we'll do it all over again. So, thank you very much for listening.